The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, crisp white paper that felt like a blade against my trembling fingers. But it wasn't the elegant calligraphy or the expensive cardstock that made my blood freeze. It was the handwritten note tucked inside, written in my sister's perfect cursive. "Come see what true love looks like. Front row seat reserved just for you. Victoria." I stood in my empty apartment, still wearing yesterday's clothes, surrounded by boxes I hadn't had the strength to unpack since moving out. The invitation fluttered to the floor as my knees gave way. 6 months. It had been 6 months since I caught them together, since my world crumbled, since the two people I trusted most carved out my heart with surgical precision. And now they wanted me to watch them celebrate. The morning sun streamed through bare windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor where I knelt. My reflection stared back at me from the dark television screen. Hollow eyes, sharp cheekbones more pronounced from weeks of barely eating, auburn hair hanging limp around my shoulders. I looked like a ghost of the woman I used to be. But ghosts, I realized, picking up that invitation with steady hands, could be terrifying things. The memory hit me like a physical blow, transporting me back to that night 6 months ago when everything changed forever. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening. 6 months earlier. I had been running late that evening, my heels clicking against the marble floor of the downtown office building where I worked as a marketing director. The presentation for the Howard account had run over, but I didn't mind. Landing this client would mean a promotion, maybe even enough money for Austin and me to finally put a down payment on that house we'd been dreaming about. The thought of surprising him made me smile as I fumbled for my keys outside our shared apartment on Riverside Drive. We had been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months. The diamond on my finger caught the hallway light, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the walls. Austin had proposed on a beach in Santorini, dropping to one knee as the sun set over the Aegean Sea. It was perfect. He was perfect. I pushed open the door quietly, planning to surprise him. Maybe I'd cook his favorite pasta, open that bottle of wine we'd been saving. The apartment was dim, lit only by candles flickering in the living room. Music played softly, the same song that had been playing when we first danced together at my cousin's wedding. "Austin," I called softly, setting my briefcase down by the door. "You romantic fool, what's all this for?" That's when I heard it. A sound that would replay in my nightmares for months to come. Soft laughter, feminine and familiar. Too familiar. My heart began to race, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was watching a movie. Maybe Victoria had stopped by to help plan the wedding like she'd been doing for weeks. My younger sister had been so excited about my engagement, so helpful with every detail. She'd even helped Austin pick out the ring. I moved toward the living room on silent feet, my heels discarded by the door. The laughter came again, followed by a deeper sound that made my stomach clench with something that wasn't quite recognition yet, but felt like ice forming in my veins. The living room was empty, but the candles continued to flicker. Rose petals were scattered across the floor, red roses, Austin's signature romantic gesture. My engagement photos smiled back at me from the mantelpiece, mocking in their happiness. Another sound from upstairs. From our bedroom. My legs moved without conscious thought, carrying me up the familiar staircase I'd climbed thousands of times. The wooden steps creaked softly under my weight, each sound amplifying the thunderous beating of my heart. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. I pressed my palm against the door and pushed. The world stopped. Austin was there, his dark hair tousled, his strong shoulders bare in the candlelight. But he wasn't alone. Beneath him, her porcelain skin glowing in the flickering light, was Victoria. My sister. My beautiful, perfect 26-year-old sister who had never been second best at anything in her life. They moved together with an intimacy that spoke of practice, of familiarity, of something that had been building for far longer than this single moment. Her manicured nails, painted the same shade of pink I'd helped her choose just last week, traced patterns across his back. His lips found the hollow of her throat, the same spot he'd kissed on me just that morning before work. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a sob, something, because they froze. Austin's head turned, and when his dark eyes met mine, I saw something that destroyed me more than the scene itself. Relief. Not guilt, not shame, but relief that the secret was finally out. Melody, he said, and even my name sounded different in his mouth. Tired. Like it was a burden he was finally free to put down. Victoria's blue eyes, identical to mine, inherited from our mother, met mine over Austin's shoulder. And she smiled. It wasn't apologetic or guilty or even triumphant. It was serene. Like she was exactly where she belonged. We were going to tell you, she said softly, making no move to cover herself or push Austin away. After your presentation. We thought you deserved to hear it properly. The words hit me like physical blows. My knees buckled and I grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling. How long? The words scraped out of my throat like broken glass. Austin sat up, running a hand through his hair in that familiar gesture I'd found endearing for 4 years. Melody, please. Let us explain. How long? I repeated louder this time. Victoria sat up too, the sheet falling away from her perfect body without shame. Since your engagement party, she said simply. Remember? You were so busy with work that week, you asked me to help Austin with the final details. We spent a lot of time together. The engagement party. 3 months ago. I remembered that week. The Howard presentation had been my first big break and I'd worked 16-hour days to perfect it. I'd been grateful when Victoria offered to help Austin with the party planning. Grateful for such a thoughtful sister. We didn't mean for it to happen, Austin said, but his hand was already finding Victoria's under the sheet. It just did. What we have, what Victoria and I have, it's different. It's real, Victoria finished, her voice gentle but unwavering. I'm sorry, Melody. I really am. But what Austin and I found together, it's the kind of love that comes once in a lifetime. You understand, don't you? I stared at them, these two people who had been the center of my universe. Austin, who had held me through my father's funeral 2 years ago. Victoria, who had been my maid of honor, who had helped me pick out my wedding dress just last month. The ring, I whispered, looking down at the diamond on my finger. You helped him pick out my engagement ring. Victoria had the grace to look away for a moment. I wanted you to have something beautiful. Before. Before what? Before you stole my life. No one stole anything. Austin said, his voice taking on that patient tone he used when he thought I was being dramatic. What Victoria and I have, it's not about hurting you. It's about finding where we truly belong. I pulled the ring off my finger, surprised by how easily it slid off after months of being a permanent fixture. I'd lost weight from stress and long work hours, but I hadn't noticed until now. I set it carefully on the dresser, right next to the framed photo of Austin and me from our vacation to Italy last year. I need you both out of my apartment, I said quietly. Melody, Austin started. Get out. Now. Victoria rose from the bed with fluid grace, completely comfortable in her nudity as she gathered her clothes. She was stunning, tall, willowy, with the kind of effortless beauty that had made her prom queen, homecoming queen, the favorite daughter in every room she entered. I'll pack my things tonight, Austin said, finally showing a hint of discomfort. I never wanted to hurt you, Mel. You have to believe that. I watched them dress in silence, these two people who had just obliterated my entire future with the casual ease of changing channels. Victoria moved around the room like she belonged there, like she'd been there many times before. But she had, I realized. All those times I'd worked late, all those evenings when Austin said he was too tired to go out, all those weekends when Victoria had been busy with mysterious plans. We'll be respectful, Victoria said as they prepared to leave. We'll wait a reasonable amount of time before we go public. We're not monsters, Melody. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing my sister's face. What's a reasonable amount of time to wait before you marry my fiancé? The question hung in the air like smoke. Austin and Victoria exchanged a look that confirmed what I already suspected. They had discussed this. They had planned this. They were already thinking about their future together. We'll talk when you're ready, Victoria said finally. I love you, Melody. That hasn't changed. After they left, I sat on the floor of my bedroom for hours, staring at the rumpled sheets that still smelled like my sister's perfume, the same perfume I'd bought her for Christmas. The candles burned down to nothing, filling the room with smoke and the scent of melted wax. By morning I had made my decision. I called in sick to work, packed everything I owned and moved to a studio apartment across town. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, and disappeared from the life I'd built with Austin. From the family that had chosen Victoria just like they always had. For 6 months I lived like a hermit. I threw myself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession, earning that promotion and a corner office with a view of the river. I learned to cook for one, to sleep in a bed that had never held anyone but me, to exist in a world where love was just another 4-letter word that meant nothing. And then the invitation arrived. I held the invitation for a long time, reading and rereading the elegant script. Mr. and Mrs. Richard Blackwood request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter Victoria Rose to Austin James Mitchell. The date was circled in red ink, Victoria's handwriting again. 3 weeks away. The venue was the Riverside Country Club, the same place where we'd celebrated every major family milestone. The same place where Austin and I had attended my cousin's wedding and talked about our own ceremony someday. The cruelest part wasn't the invitation itself. It was the obvious thought that had gone into it. The paper was cream-colored, not white. Victoria knew I preferred cream. The font was Garamond, elegant but not overly feminine. A compromise between Victoria's taste and what she knew Austin would approve of. Even in planning her wedding to my former fiancé, she had considered my preferences. It was so very Victoria. Thoughtful and cruel in the same breath. I set the invitation on my kitchen counter and stared at it for 3 days. I didn't eat. I barely slept. I just stared at that piece of paper and felt something cold and calculating unfurl in my chest like a poisonous flower blooming in fast forward. On Friday evening I finally picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. Melody. My mother's voice was warm but cautious. Sweetheart, we've been so worried about you. Victoria said you needed space, but 6 months. I got the invitation, I said without preamble. A long pause. In the background, I could hear the familiar sounds of my childhood home. The tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of my father's television in the den. Oh honey, Mom said softly. I tried to tell her it was too soon, but Victoria, you know how she is when she's made up her mind. She loves you so much, Melody. She wanted you to be part of their special day. Their special day, I repeated flatly. Melody, I know this is hard. But Victoria and Austin, what they have is real. I've seen them together and I've never seen your sister so happy. Or Austin for that matter. Sometimes these things just happen, sweetheart. Love doesn't follow rules. The poisonous flower in my chest bloomed wider. Even my mother had chosen Victoria. Even my mother thought their love was beautiful, something to be celebrated rather than condemned. Will you come? Mom asked hopefully. It would mean so much to Victoria. And to me. We miss you, honey. I'll think about it, I said and hung up. That night I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and really looked at myself for the first time in months. The woman staring back was a stranger, thin, sharp-featured, with eyes that held something dark and glittering. I had become someone new in my self-imposed exile. Someone harder. Someone who might just be capable of things the old Melody never would have considered. I picked up the invitation one more time and read Victoria's handwritten note again. Come see what true love looks like. I will, I said to my reflection. But you're not going to like what I bring to show you. I spent the next week making phone calls to people I hadn't spoken to in months. Old friends, former colleagues, family members who had watched Victoria and me grow up together. The conversations followed a similar pattern. Surprise at hearing from me, awkward condolences about Austin, and then, inevitably, the question I was waiting for. Are you going to the wedding? I think so, I would say. I want to see Victoria happy. The lies came so easily now. Everything came easily when you had nothing left to lose. But information gathering wasn't my only purpose. I had a more specific goal, and it required reaching out to someone I'd hoped never to contact again. Trevor Ashworth answered on the second ring, his voice as smooth and confident as ever. Well. Melody Blackwood. I heard about the dramatic turn your life took. Austin Mitchell, right? I always knew that guy was a snake. Trevor and I had dated briefly in college before I met Austin. He was everything Austin wasn't, reckless, unpredictable, and completely untrustworthy. But he was also brilliant, charming, and he owed me a favor from a night 4 years ago when I'd lied to police to give him an alibi for a bar fight that could have ended his law career before it started. I need your help, I said simply. Does this have to do with your sister's upcoming nuptials? Because I have to say, Mel, that invitation was a masterpiece of passive aggression. You got one too? Everyone got one. Victoria's being very thorough in her humiliation campaign. The whole city knows she stole your fiancé and is now throwing it in your face. The words should have stung, but instead they fed the cold fire growing in my chest. Victoria wasn't just marrying Austin, she was making a spectacle of it. Making sure everyone knew she had one. I need you to find out something for me, I said. About Austin's business dealings. About his company's finances. Trevor's laugh was low and appreciative. Oh, this is going to be fun. What exactly are we looking for? Anything that might interest the IRS. Or the Securities and Exchange Commission. Or anyone else who doesn't like it when investment advisors play fast and loose with their clients' money. Austin worked for a prestigious investment firm downtown, managing portfolios for wealthy clients. It was how we'd afforded our expensive apartment, how we'd been able to plan the kind of wedding most people only dreamed of. But I remembered conversations, late-night phone calls he'd taken in the next room, stress lines around his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking, expensive gifts that seemed to come out of nowhere. You think he's dirty? I think he's desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. Trevor was quiet for a moment. Then, this is going to cost you. Not money, I know you're good for that now with your fancy promotion. But I'm going to want details. I want to know exactly what you're planning to do with whatever I find. You'll get your story, I promised. When do you need this? I looked at the invitation still sitting on my counter. 2.5 weeks. Can you do it? Honey, I can do anything. The question is, are you sure you want to go down this road? Once you start pulling threads, the whole sweater might unravel. I'm counting on it. After I hung up with Trevor, I called in another favor. This one required swallowing more pride, but I was getting good at that. Cassandra? It's Melody Blackwood. Cassandra Price had been my biggest rival in college. A journalism major who had made it her mission to expose every scandal, every secret, every buried truth on campus. She now worked for the city's most read gossip blog, and she had never forgotten the time I'd scooped her on a story about the dean's embezzlement scandal. Melody Blackwood, she purred. I wondered when you'd call. I've been following your little family drama with great interest. I have a story for you. Potentially a big one. I'm listening. Not yet. But I'll need you to be ready to publish on a moment's notice. Wedding day, actually. Your sister's wedding? Well, this just keeps getting better. What kind of story are we talking about? The kind that ends careers. Cassandra's silence was thoughtful rather than hesitant. She was calculating angles, measuring the potential impact, weighing the risks against the rewards. I'll need verification. Sources. Documentation. You'll have everything you need. But I want exclusive rights for 24 hours. No one else gets the story until you've published. Done. But Melody? This better be worth it. If you're wasting my time for some petty revenge scheme. It's not petty, I said quietly. And trust me, it will be worth it. Trevor called back in 10 days with news that exceeded even my darkest hopes. Your boy Austin has been very naughty, he said without preamble. We're talking federal charges naughty. Prison time naughty. Front page of the financial section naughty. I was sitting in my office staring out at the river through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sparkled below me, unaware that somewhere in those glittering buildings, lives were about to change forever. Tell me everything. Austin's been running a classic Ponzi scheme for about 18 months now. Small scale, targeting elderly clients who trust him with their retirement funds. He's been using new investor money to pay returns to existing clients while siphoning off profits for himself. The usual story: expensive lifestyle, pressure to maintain appearances, easy access to other people's money. My heart hammered against my ribs. How much? We're looking at roughly $2 million in client funds that have mysteriously vanished. Maybe more. $2 million. Enough to destroy lives, to leave elderly retirees destitute, to warrant serious prison time. How did you find this? I have a friend who works in compliance at his firm. Turns out Austin's been sloppy lately, distracted by love, perhaps? He's been moving money around without proper documentation, creating false statements, the works. My friend's been building a file for months, trying to decide whether to report it internally or go straight to the feds. And I convinced him that sometimes justice needs a little push. He's agreed to turn over everything he has, but he wants immunity and witness protection. This goes deep, Mel. Austin's not working alone. The room suddenly felt too small, too bright. I stood up and walked to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. Far below, people moved through their lives unaware that everything was about to change. Who else is involved? That's the beautiful part. His business partner, Richard Castellane. Ring any bells? My blood turned to ice. He's on Victoria's guest list. Austin introduced them 6 months ago. Makes sense. Castellane's been helping Austin hide the money trail, creating fake investment opportunities, falsifying documents. They're in this together right up to their necks. I closed my eyes and saw Victoria's face on the night I caught them together. The serene smile, the complete lack of guilt or shame. She thought she had won the prize. She had no idea she was tying herself to a man whose life was about to implode. Trevor, I need you to do something else for me. And this time I don't care what it costs. I'm all ears. I need you to find out exactly when the FBI is planning to move on this. And I need you to make sure they don't move until after the wedding. Trevor's laugh was pure delight. Oh, Melody. You magnificent, terrifying woman. You want them to arrest Austin at his own wedding. I want them to arrest him when it will cause maximum damage to everyone involved. When the most people will see exactly what kind of man Victoria chose over her own sister. That is diabolical. I love it. But are you sure you want to go through with this? This isn't just revenge anymore, Mel. This is justice. Austin's victims deserve to see him pay for what he's done. They will see him pay. But Victoria will pay too. And everyone who chose her side, everyone who thought their love story was beautiful, they'll all know exactly what kind of fairy tale they were really celebrating. All right, I'll make some calls. But Melody, once this starts, there's no stopping it. Are you prepared for the fallout? I thought about the last 6 months. The sleepless nights, the empty apartment, the way my mother's voice had sounded when she told me Victoria and Austin's love was real. The way everyone had accepted that sometimes these things just happened, that love didn't follow rules. I've been living with fallout for 6 months, I said. Now it's their turn. With 1 week left before the wedding, I made my final preparations. I bought a dress, not the pale pink Victoria had suggested for family members, but a stunning white sheath that hugged my newly slender figure like a second skin. It was the kind of dress that would turn heads, start conversations, and make photographers very happy. I made an appointment with the best stylist in the city and emerged 5 hours later transformed. My auburn hair was now a rich chocolate brown, cut in a sleek bob that framed my face and made my blue eyes look larger, more intense. I'd lost 20 pounds since the breakup, and the stylist showed me how to use makeup to enhance my sharp cheekbones and hollow cheeks. The woman staring back at me in the mirror looked dangerous. She looked like someone who could destroy lives with a smile. Perfect. I called my mother the night before the wedding. Melody. Oh, sweetheart, please tell me you're calling to say you'll be there tomorrow. I'll be there, Mom. Her relief was audible. Oh, thank God. Victoria will be so happy. We all will. It's been too long, honey. Has it? Something in my tone must have warned her because she was quiet for a moment. Melody, you're not planning to. You wouldn't do anything to upset Victoria on her wedding day, would you? I wouldn't dream of upsetting Victoria, I said truthfully. But Mom, you might want to have your phone turned off during the ceremony. Trust me on this. What does that mean? Melody, what? I hung up and turned off my phone. Tomorrow I would turn it back on. Tomorrow, when the world started calling with questions, I was finally ready to answer. I spent the evening packing a small bag with everything I would need. The box Trevor had delivered that afternoon, containing copies of every document that would destroy Austin's life. A USB drive with video files I'd spent weeks collecting. The business card Cassandra had given me with her direct number. And a small digital recorder that would capture everything for posterity. At midnight, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror one last time, practicing the words I would say when the priest asked if anyone objected to the union. I had written them down, memorized them, rehearsed them until they felt natural in my mouth. But in the end I realized I wouldn't need a speech. Sometimes the truth spoke for itself. The Riverside Country Club looked like something out of a fairy tale. White roses and baby's breath dripped from every available surface, creating cascades of flowers that must have cost more than most people's cars. The September air was crisp and perfect, with just enough breeze to make the silk ribbons flutter like butterfly wings. I arrived exactly 15 minutes late, fashionable, but not so late as to draw attention before I was ready. The parking lot was full of expensive cars and I recognized many of the license plates. Austin's business colleagues, Victoria's sorority sisters, family friends who had watched us grow up. My own car stood out among the luxury sedans and SUVs. I had rented something special for the occasion. A red Maserati that purred like a satisfied cat and turned heads as I pulled into the valet circle. The young man who took my keys did a double take when he saw me emerge from the driver's seat. The white dress fit perfectly, skimming my curves without being inappropriate for daytime. My new hair caught the sunlight, and the professional makeup made my eyes look enormous and mysterious. "Stunning dress, miss," he said, and his genuine appreciation warmed something cold inside my chest. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at me like I was something beautiful rather than something broken. "Thank you," I said, slipping him a generous tip. "Keep her close. I might need to leave quickly." Inside, the country club had been transformed into Victoria's dream wedding venue. Cream and gold everywhere, with touches of blush pink that complemented her complexion perfectly. Crystal chandeliers caught the afternoon light streaming through tall windows, and the scent of roses was so strong it was almost overwhelming. I signed the guest book, just my name in bold script, and made my way toward the ceremony space. The cocktail hour was winding down and guests were starting to migrate toward their seats. That's when I saw him. Austin stood near the altar in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his dark hair styled exactly the way I used to like it. He was laughing at something his best man had said, relaxed and happy in a way that made my chest tighten with remembered pain. But then his eyes found mine across the room and his smile faltered. For just a moment his face went completely blank. Then confusion flickered across his features. He leaned toward his best man, Kevin, I remembered, another investment advisor from his firm, and whispered something. Kevin turned to look at me and I saw his eyebrows rise. Then Austin was walking toward me, weaving between guests who were still mingling with champagne glasses in their hands. "Melody," he said when he reached me, and my name still sounded tired in his mouth. Victoria said you might come, but I wasn't sure. You look." He gestured vaguely at my dress, my hair, the general transformation. "Different. Change suits me," I said simply. "Listen, I know this must be difficult for you. Does it look difficult?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. "I'm here to celebrate Victoria's happiness. Our family's happiness. Isn't that what you wanted?" Austin's dark eyes searched my face for some hint of sarcasm or pain, but I kept my expression serene. I had learned to wear masks in the past 6 months. "I suppose it is," he said finally. "Thank you. For being here, I mean. It means a lot to Victoria. Where is my sister? I should congratulate the bride. She's in the bridal suite, finishing up with photos. But Melody." He reached out like he might touch my arm, then thought better of it. "I want you to know that what happened between us, it wasn't about you. You're an amazing woman, and someday you'll find someone who—" "Austin," I interrupted gently. "It's your wedding day. You should be with your bride, not explaining yourself to your ex-fiancé." Relief flashed across his face. "You're right. Thank you for understanding." I watched him walk back toward the altar, stopping to shake hands and exchange pleasantries with guests along the way. He moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of a man who believed his secrets were safe, his future secure. 5 minutes later, Trevor appeared at my elbow like a well-dressed shadow. "You clean up nice, counselor," I said without looking at him. "So do you? That dress is going to cause quite a stir. Very bridal." "That's the idea. Our friends in federal law enforcement are in position. They're waiting for my signal." I turned to study his profile. Trevor looked distinguished in his navy suit, every inch the successful attorney he'd become. But his eyes held the same wild gleam they'd had in college when he was planning something particularly outrageous. "Are you having second thoughts?" he asked. "Are you?" "Hell no. This is the most fun I've had in years. Plus, Austin Mitchell owes me money from a poker game 3 years ago. I consider this interest." Despite everything, I found myself smiling. "You're terrible. So are you, apparently. I have to admit I'm impressed. 6 months ago you were the nice girl who brought cookies to office parties and cried at insurance commercials. Now look at you. People change. Some people change. Others just finally show the world who they really were all along. Before I could respond to that unsettling observation, the wedding coordinator, a thin woman with nervous energy and a headset, appeared beside us. "Excuse me, are you family? We're seating family members now." "Sister of the bride," I said. Her face brightened. "Oh, wonderful. Right this way. We have the perfect seat for you, front row aisle seat. You'll have an excellent view of everything." Victoria's sense of drama, even in her seating arrangements. She wanted me to see everything, to witness every moment of her triumph. She had no idea she was positioning me exactly where I needed to be. I followed the coordinator down the petal-strewn aisle, noting the perfect arrangements, the expensive linens, the string quartet playing soft classical music. No expense had been spared. Austin's ill-gotten gains were being put to good use. The front row was filling with family members I hadn't seen in months. My aunts and uncles, Victoria's godparents, my grandmother who still pinched my cheeks like I was 5 years old. They all turned to look at me as I approached, and I watched their expressions cycle through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been admiration. "Melody," my Aunt Catherine stood to embrace me. "Oh, sweetheart, you look absolutely gorgeous. That dress, your hair, you're radiant." "Thank you, Aunt Catherine. You look wonderful too. We've all been so worried about you. Your mother said you weren't doing well after everything that happened." "I'm doing much better now," I said, settling into my seat. "Tonight feels like a new beginning." He squeezed my hand. "I'm so glad you came. Victoria was heartbroken that you two weren't speaking. Family is everything, isn't it?" "Everything," I agreed. The ceremony was set to begin in 10 minutes. Around me, 300 guests settled into their seats, chatting softly and admiring the elaborate decorations. The photographer moved through the crowd like a dancer, capturing candid moments and carefully staged shots. I reached into my small clutch and checked that everything was still there. The USB drive, the business card, the small box that would change everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Cassandra, standing by. "Ready when you are." The string quartet shifted into the opening notes of Canon in D, and a hush fell over the crowd. The ceremony was beginning. Austin took his position at the altar, flanked by his groomsmen. He looked nervous now, adjusting his tie and running a hand through his hair. His eyes scanned the crowd until they found mine, and he offered a small, uncertain smile. I smiled back, the same serene expression Victoria had worn that night 6 months ago when she destroyed my life with surgical precision. The bridal party began their procession down the aisle. Victoria's sorority sisters, all blonde and beautiful in their blush pink dresses. The maid of honor, Rebecca, Victoria's best friend since childhood, who had helped her plan this entire spectacle. And then the music changed to the wedding march and every guest rose to their feet. Victoria appeared at the back of the aisle like a vision from a fairy tale. Her dress was pure white silk and lace, with a train that stretched 6 feet behind her. Her blonde hair was swept up in an elaborate chignon adorned with tiny pearls, and her makeup was flawless. She carried a bouquet of white roses and peonies that perfectly matched the ceremony decorations. She looked absolutely radiant. She looked like a bride who was madly in love, marrying the man of her dreams in front of everyone she cared about. She looked like everything I had dreamed of being 6 months ago. My father walked beside her, distinguished and proud in his black tuxedo. He was beaming, completely caught up in the joy of the moment. When his eyes met mine, he winked, a gesture so familiar and loving that for a moment my resolve almost wavered. But then Victoria drew level with my row and her eyes found mine. She was still smiling, but something flickered in her expression. Surprise at seeing me there, yes, but something else. Something that might have been nervousness. She had dressed me in white. She had positioned me in the front row. But now that the moment was here, now that she could see the new woman I had become, uncertainty crept into her perfect smile. I gave her my warmest smile and mouthed the words, "You look beautiful." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, and she continued down the aisle to where Austin waited. When she reached the altar, my father lifted her veil and kissed her cheek before placing her hand in Austin's. The gesture was tender, traditional, and completely unaware of what was about to unfold. "Dearly beloved," the priest began, his voice carrying easily through the packed chapel, "we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Victoria Rose Blackwood and Austin James Mitchell, I listened with half an ear as the priest spoke about love and commitment, about the sacred bond of marriage, about the promises Victoria and Austin were about to make to each other. Around me, guests wiped away tears and smiled at the beautiful couple standing at the altar. Victoria and Austin held hands and gazed into each other's eyes with the kind of intensity that made everyone believe in true love. They looked perfect together, her ethereal beauty complementing his dark handsomeness, her delicate femininity balancing his strong masculinity. They looked like the kind of couple who belonged on magazine covers in fairy tales in happily ever after stories. They had no idea that their fairy tale was about to become a nightmare. The priest began the traditional vows. Austin, do you take Victoria to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part? I do, Austin said, his voice strong and clear. Victoria, do you take Austin to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part? I do, Victoria whispered, tears of joy streaming down her perfect cheeks. The priest smiled. If anyone has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The chapel fell into the traditional silence. 300 guests held their breath, waiting for the moment to pass so the ceremony could continue toward its joyful conclusion. I stood up. The movement was fluid, graceful, impossible to ignore. Every head in the chapel turned toward me, and I heard the sharp intake of breath from my family members in the front row. Victoria's bouquet trembled in her hands, and Austin's face went completely white. I object, I said clearly, my voice carrying to every corner of the chapel. The priest looked confused. This obviously wasn't something he'd dealt with before. I'm sorry, miss, but do you have legal grounds for this objection? I do, I said, reaching into my clutch and withdrawing the small wooden box Trevor had given me. Your Honor, excuse me, Father. I have evidence that the groom has committed multiple federal crimes and is currently under investigation by the FBI. The chapel erupted. Guests began talking all at once, their voices rising in shock and confusion. The photographer, God bless him, kept snapping pictures. This was going to make one hell of a wedding album. Melody. Victoria's voice cut through the chaos. What are you doing? I walked down the aisle toward the altar, my heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. Every step brought me closer to the moment I had been planning for 3 weeks. I'm sorry to interrupt your special day, Victoria, I said loud enough for everyone to hear. But I thought you should know exactly what kind of man you're marrying. Austin found his voice. This is insane. Melody, you can't just... Can't what? Tell the truth. I reached the altar and turned to face the assembled guests. 300 faces stared back at me, ranging from shocked to confused to fascinated. Should I have let you commit fraud in my sister's name too? I opened the wooden box and withdrew a thick manila folder. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to inform you that the groom has been operating a Ponzi scheme for the past 18 months, stealing approximately $2 million from his elderly clients' retirement funds. The words hit the chapel like a physical force. Several people gasped audibly. Austin's business colleagues in the crowd looked at each other with dawning horror. His boss, I noticed, had gone very pale and was already reaching for his phone. That's a lie, Austin said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? I opened the folder and withdrew a bank statement. This is your personal account, Austin. The one you thought no one knew about. The one where you've been depositing money stolen from the retirement fund of Agnes Howard, age 74. I held up another document. And this is a falsified investment report you created for Harold Kim, showing a 12% return on money you actually lost in bad stock picks. Victoria was staring at Austin now, her bouquet forgotten in her hands. Austin, tell her she's lying. Tell everyone she's lying. But Austin couldn't speak. His mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. I continued my presentation, my voice calm and professional. I have documented evidence of wire fraud, securities fraud, and elder abuse. All provided by Austin's own business partner, Richard Castellane, who has already agreed to testify against him in exchange for immunity. Castellane, who was sitting in the third row, stood up abruptly and headed for the exit. But Trevor appeared in the aisle, blocking his path. Going somewhere, Richard? Trevor asked pleasantly. I think the FBI agents outside would like to have a word with you. That's when the chapel doors opened and 6 federal agents in dark suits walked in. The lead agent, a stern woman in her 40s, approached the altar with her badge held high. "Austin Mitchell, you're under arrest for securities fraud, wire fraud and money laundering," she announced. "You have the right to remain silent." The rest of her words were lost in the chaos that erupted throughout the chapel. Guests were on their feet, talking, shouting, some trying to push toward the exits. The photographer was having the time of his life, capturing every moment of the drama. But I only had eyes for Victoria. My sister stood frozen at the altar in her perfect white dress, watching the man she'd stolen from me being handcuffed in front of 300 witnesses. Her face had gone from pale to green, and for a moment I thought she might be sick. "Victoria," I said gently, stepping closer to her. "I tried to warn you about the kind of man he really was." She turned to look at me and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before: defeat. "You knew," she whispered. "You knew about this when you came here." "I suspected something was wrong months ago," I said truthfully. "But I was too in love to see it clearly. You did me a favor, really. You saved me from marrying a criminal." "Melody." My mother was pushing through the crowd toward us, her face a mask of shock and confusion. "What is happening? What have you done?" "I've prevented Victoria from becoming an accessory to federal crimes," I said calmly. "She should be thanking me." Austin was being led away in handcuffs, his groomsmen trailing behind him in stunned silence. As he passed my row, he looked directly at me. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's been over for 6 months. You just didn't know it yet." Victoria suddenly dropped her bouquet and lunged toward me, her face twisted with rage. "You vindictive bitch. You destroyed my wedding. You destroyed my life." "No," I said, stepping back calmly. "I saved your life. You just don't realize it yet." "Ladies and gentlemen," the priest said, finally finding his voice. Perhaps we should all. This ceremony is obviously postponed indefinitely." The understatement of the year. As guests began filing out of the chapel in shocked clusters, I felt a hand on my arm. Trevor appeared beside me, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "That," he said, "was even better than I hoped. The FBI got everything on camera. Castellane tried to run but got caught in the parking lot. And I just got word that the SEC is freezing all of Austin's assets as of 20 minutes ago." "What about the victims? Will they get their money back?" "Most of it, probably. Austin wasn't smart enough to hide it offshore. It's all sitting in domestic accounts that the feds can trace." I nodded, feeling suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was wearing off, leaving me hollow and strangely empty. "Melody." Cassandra appeared at my other elbow, her eyes bright with professional excitement. "That was incredible. I got everything recorded. This is going to be front-page news tomorrow. But I need a statement from you. An exclusive interview about how you uncovered the fraud." "Later," I said. "I need to." I wasn't sure what I needed. To leave maybe. To go home to my quiet apartment and process what had just happened. To figure out who I was now that my revenge was complete. But Victoria wasn't done with me yet. "Melody," she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. I turned to see her standing alone at the altar, her wedding dress wrinkled and her perfect hair coming undone. Was this all just revenge? All of this? Was it just because I fell in love with your ex-fiancé? The chapel had mostly emptied, but the remaining guests, family members, close friends, the photographer who was still documenting everything, fell silent to hear my answer. I looked at my sister, really looked at her for the first time in 6 months. She was still beautiful, even with mascara streaking down her cheeks and her dress rumpled. She was still the golden child, the favorite, the one who had never failed at anything in her life. But for the first time she was also the one standing alone. "Victoria," I said gently, "I didn't do this because you fell in love with Austin. I did this because you chose him over me. Because when I needed my sister most, you decided that your happiness was more important than my pain. I never meant to hurt you." "Yes, you did," I interrupted. "Maybe not consciously, but you did. You knew exactly what you were doing when you slept with my fiancé. You knew what it would do to me, and you did it anyway because you've never had to consider anyone else's feelings before." She opened her mouth to protest, but I continued. But here's the thing, Victoria. Even if you had told me about your feelings for Austin, even if you had come to me honestly and asked me to step aside, I still would have uncovered his crimes. Because that's who I am now. I don't ignore red flags anymore. I don't trust people just because I want to love them. And I don't let anyone, not even my sister, take advantage of me. I walked closer to her, until we were standing face to face in front of the altar where she had planned to marry a criminal. So no, this wasn't just revenge, I said. This was justice. For Austin's victims. For the elderly people whose retirement funds he stole. And yes, for me too. Because I deserved better than what you both gave me. Victoria's shoulders began to shake, and for a moment I thought she was crying. But when she looked up, her eyes were blazing with anger. You're not the victim here, Melody, she said. You're the one who just destroyed my wedding in front of everyone we know. You're the one who humiliated me, who ruined my reputation, who made me look like a fool. I didn't make you look like anything, I said quietly. I just showed everyone who you really are. Someone who would steal her sister's fiancé and then invite her to watch them get married. Someone who cared more about winning than about love or loyalty or family. And what about you? She shot back. What does this make you? Someone who would destroy her own sister's happiness just to get even. I considered the question seriously. It was one I'd been asking myself for weeks. It makes me someone who won't be anyone's victim ever again, I said finally. It makes me someone who fights back. Victoria stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something else. Recognition maybe. Or respect. I don't know who you are anymore, she whispered. I'm exactly who I always was, I said. You just never bothered to look. The article Cassandra wrote about Austin's arrest and the dramatic wedding confrontation became the most read piece in her publication's history. It was picked up by national news outlets, turned into a case study for business school ethics classes, and spawned a dozen copycat stories about similar wedding day revelations. Austin pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Castellane got 6 years for his cooperation. Most of their victims recovered about 80% of their stolen funds. Victoria moved to Los Angeles 3 weeks after the wedding. That wasn't. She got a job with a talent agency and, according to our mother, was dating a screenwriter who specialized in romantic comedies. The irony wasn't lost on me. As for me, I kept my promotion in my corner office. I kept my new apartment, my new haircut, and my new understanding of what I was capable of when pushed too far. I started dating again, carefully with my eyes wide open and my guard up, but dating nonetheless. I never did open a support program for women. That wasn't my story to tell. Instead, I did something else. I started a consulting firm that specialized in uncovering financial fraud. My first client was a woman whose husband had been stealing from their joint accounts to fund a gambling addiction. My second was a man whose business partner was embezzling from their construction company. Trevor became my business partner. Turned out we made a good team. The invitation to Victoria's second engagement party arrived last month. This time there was no handwritten note, no special message. Just a formal invitation to celebrate her engagement to the screenwriter, who apparently wrote happy endings for a living. I didn't go. Not because I was still angry, but because I didn't need to anymore. I kept the invitation though. I put it in a frame on my office wall, next to a photo from that day at the Riverside Country Club. The moment when the FBI agent was reading Austin his rights while Victoria stood frozen in her wedding dress. It reminds me every day that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about becoming someone they can never hurt again. Sometimes it's about learning that you were never as helpless as you thought you were. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's about discovering that the person you become after everything falls apart is someone you actually like better than the person you were before. I never told Victoria I loved her at that altar, standing there in my white dress like some dark mirror of what she'd hoped to become. But I did love her, even as I destroyed her perfect day. I loved her enough to save her from a man who would have dragged her down with him eventually. I loved her enough to show her exactly what choosing him over family really meant. And I loved myself enough to make sure that when the dust settled, I was the one left standing. In the end, that was the only victory that mattered.